Hello, guys, and welcome back to another episode of MD Investor. And unfortunately, we have another math shooting in America. It's only been a couple of weeks since the math shooting in Buffalo, and now we have another math shooting in Uvalde, Texas, in an elementary school. It's the MD Investor, but again, we normally talk about personal finance and educating ourselves, you know, so we can break the cycle of generational poverty. But like I say, there's something bigger than personal finance. Without safety, without security, without life, personal finance is meaningless. So there's a lot of issues here, you know, a lot of issues. And what I want to focus on today is we're going to just kind of go through the timeline of what happened, okay? And just a quick one sentence summary on May 24th, a shooter entered a elementary school in Uvalde, Texas and massacred 19 children, 2 adults after he shot his grandmother. So we're gonna kind of go through the timeline because there's a lot of issues in terms of the delay, but you'll see as we go through it, the delay of the responding officers. Okay, this is a tough one because they're little children. A timeline of how the Texas school massacre and the police response unfolded, because this is at the heart of everything, the response. Okay, so this is okay. So in the prior month, and a lot of them, as we dig into the details, we see that there are social media posts. So the shooter was in a group chat on Instagram, and in it there was a February 20th discussion of the suspect being a school shooter. So someone said that. On March 1st, the shooter had an Instagram chat with several others in which he discussed buying a gun. 2 days later, there was another group chat in which someone said, quote, word on the street was that the suspect was buying a gun. The shooter replied, just bought something RN right now. Just bought something right now. He's not saying what, but probably bought a gun. On March 14th, so I guess 2 weeks later, on March 14th, the shooter wrote in an Instagram post, quote, 10 more days. Another user replied, quote, are you going to shoot up a school or something? The shooter replied, quote, no, and stop asking dumb questions and you'll see. On May 17th and May 20th, the shooter legally purchased, the keyword legally, purchased 2 AR platform rifles at a local federal firearms licensee, said Texas State Senator John Whitmer. So he bought 2 AR style rifle, an 18-year-old kid, and he bought it legally because in Texas, at that age, you're able to get it. The shooter also purchased 375 rounds of ammunition on May 18th. So he purchased 1 AR rifle on May 17th, 375 rounds of bullets the next day, May 18th, and then 2 days later, May 20th, he bought the other rifle. State Senator Roland Gutierrez said the purchases were made for the suspect's 18th birthday. He starts off in the morning by shooting his grandmother in her head. He quote wrote at 11:21 a.m. He texts to someone in some chat room in some girl in Germany, some teenager. Quote, I just shot my grandma in her head. Seconds later, he said, I'm going to go shoot up an elementary school right now. This is 11:21, okay? On Tuesday, May 24th, not the same day, the day of the shooting. On Tuesday, May 24th at 11:27, so 6 minutes after the text, where he said he shot his grandma in the head, and now he's going to go shoot up a school. 6 minutes later, video showed an exterior door of Robb Elementary School, which is suspected to be where the shooter entered from, was propped open by a teacher. So the door was propped open by a teacher at 11:27. The next minute, 11:28, the shooter's vehicle crashes into a ditch near the school. So obviously he must live close to the school, because if he shot his grandmother, somewhere around 11, I don't know, 15 or so, and he's at the school at 11:28, crashed into a ditch. A teacher runs into a room to get a phone and returns to the exit door, and the door remains propped open. The suspect jumped out of the passenger side of the truck, so he crashed the car. Maybe the car was in a state where he couldn't open the driver's side, so he went to the passenger side, and he had a rifle and a bag, and the bag had bullets in there. That's what they said in the press conference. Two witnesses who were at a funeral home across the street from the school, they heard the crash, and they go to see what happened. The suspect began firing at them, and they ran away. They also called 911. At 11:30 a.m., a teacher reemerged in a panic and apparently called 911, McGraw said. 11:31 a.m. The suspect reached the last row of vehicles at the school parking lot and began shooting at the school. So 11:31, he's now in the parking lot of the school, and he's shooting at the school. There was no, and this was one of the discrepancies that initially was clear to the parents, the reporters, when they began looking into it. Initially, the report said there was a school resource officer or school security who engaged him. That was not true. They said there was no school resource officer that confronted the suspect outside the school, as officials had previously described. A school resource officer was not on scene, but heard the 911 call about a man with a gun, drove to the area, and sped to the back of the school to a person he thought was the suspect. But it wasn't the suspect, it was the teacher. See, I guess this Texas school district, Uvalde, had some type of emergency preparedness school shooter plan in place. And part of it was having a school resource officer, which is like an armed security person. It's also a very small town. And the school superintendent had their own department. It's about 7 people. There's like 4 officers, maybe a detective, and there is the chief. So total is about six or 7 people. So it wasn't a big department. In any event, he wasn't on scene. When he did come back, he approached someone he thought was the shooter, but it was actually a teacher. The shooter was somewhere hiding behind a car, like hunkered down. 11. So now this is where it's going to start, listening to time and everything. 11:33 a.m. The shooter entered the school and began shooting into a classroom, which is connected to a second class. He shot at least 100 rounds. That's what McGraw said, who is the head of the Texas Department of Public Safety. We talk about the Republicans and the Democrats and the battle for gun rights, the Second Amendment, and the Democrats always say, reasonable gun control. And one of the things they all talk about is semi-automatic weapons, AR-15, assault rifle, weapons of war, not being able to be available for pretty much anybody. No one needs that. No one needs that. But because of the power of the NRA as a lobby, the fear of the Republicans in red states, because they're afraid of being primaried by someone to their right who say you're weak on guns, you're trying to take away our guns, You're not standing up for the Second Amendment, and then they will lose their seat, lose the election. And remember, I said the main purpose of or the main goal of a politician is to get reelected. Why do you need 375 rounds? They said the average U.S. soldier goes into battle and they have 210 rounds. And why would a civilian need 375, 500 rounds? Why? How many deers are you hunting? How many rabbits are you hunting? Okay, let's move on. So that's 11:33. He's in the school. 11:35. 3 Uvalde Police Department officers enter through the same door as the suspect. So that's 2 minutes after he's in the building. There's 3 officers already there. Gets in. Another 3 Uvalde officers and a county sheriff follow, McGraw said, for a total of 7. Now you have 7 armed police officers on scene. The 3 initial officers went directly into the class door. The 3 initial officers went directly to the class door, which was closed, and 2 received grazing wounds from the shooter. So they attempted to go in the classroom, and he shot at them, and then they were grazed. Not seriously, just grazed. So that was 11:35. 11:37. Another 16 rounds are fired in the following minutes. So, he's there firing. It's about 100 rounds initially, and now another 16 is fired. 11:42 minutes. 11:42 a.m. A source close to a teacher received a text saying there was an active shooter on campus. CNN said that saw the text chain and confirmed the timestamp. So now, all these schools have protocols. When there's an active shooter, they send out text messages. We're going to put the school on lockdown. Do not come close to the school. Do not go into the school because it is a crime scene, essentially. 11:43 a.m. Robb Elementary announces on Facebook it's under a lockdown status due to gunshots in the area, right? You see how they phrase it? Gunshots in the area. No, it's gunshots in the school. They try not to panic the parents. It's not in the area, it's in the school. Adding that, quote, the students and staff are safe in the building. How can they be safe in the building when the gunman is in the building and he's not dead? Roughly 11:44 a.m. Officers are calling for additional resources, equipment, body armor, negotiators, and evacuating students and teachers. Now, all of the police experts, they learned from previous mass shooting. Unfortunately, there have been many previous mass shootings, and they've gained experience. And one of them, it might have been in Colorado, where there was a lone police officer on scene, and he waited for backup. And as he was waiting for backup, people were getting shot. So the new policy now is, you, as a police officer, you go to the location of the shooting. You go toward the bullets. Obviously, this is a dangerous situation, but this is a job. You go towards the bullets, and you try to neutralize or kill the suspect. No more are you waiting for backup when it's an active shooter situation. Even if you're sole officer responding. Because remember, you have a gun, you have a bulletproof vest. The kids, the teachers, all the workers in the school have nothing. So you going in after them kind of sort of even the playing field, even though we learned from previous mass shooting, especially the one in Buffalo, that they may be you may be outgunned because they may have the AR-15 military-style rifles that the Republicans and the NRA love to sell. It's a big business, but it's not conducive for public safety. The cop may have a 6-shooter, it may have a 9mm, but they're outgunned. The guy may have body armor on, like we saw in Buffalo. So now it's 11:44, and they're asking for negotiators. You don't negotiate with an active shooter. You take him out and neutralize him. I know it's a small police department. I know they probably don't have experience, but what's coming out now is that they were the chief of the superintendent of the school superintendent police department had a recent training on active shooter in December of 2021. So that's 6 months ago. roughly. So you should have known there's no negotiating. You go in and you shoot and you don't stop shooting until they're dead. Because lives are at stake. 11:51, more officers arrive on the scene. 12:03, officers continue to arrive in the hallway of the school. In the hallway of the school, but they're not going into the classroom. There are as many as 19 officers at that time in the hallway. 19 officers armed, a bulletproof vest, and they're in the hallway. And there's a short distance away are little children, 9, 10, 11-year-old, even younger, because I think it was a K through 4th grade. Maybe up to 6th grade, but these little defenseless children locked in a room with a madman with assault weapons. And in the hallway, very close by the cops, but they're in the hallway, they're not engaging what their training said they should do. 12:03 p.m. A young girl, and this is heartbreaking, a young girl from inside one of the adjoining classrooms called 911. So everybody got a cell phone now. Identifies herself, so she gives her name, and she whispers the classroom she's in. So she said, I'm in classroom 111 or 112. She whispered. The call lasted 1 minute and 23 seconds. She called back several minutes later and said, multiple people are dead. How heartbreaking is that? 7 minutes later, 12:10. First group of Deputy U.S. Marshals arrived on scene to assist. Federal, state, and local law enforcement already on scene, the Marshal Service said in its statement. 12:13 p.m. The same girl called 911 again. So she initially called 12:03, and now she's calling 12:13, 10 minutes later. 12:15, members of the Border Patrol Tactical Unit, BORTAC, arrived on scene, McGraw said. When Border Patrol agents began to arrive, the officer in charge of the situation, which is the chief of the superintendent school police department, that's 7-unit police department, I said, 7-member. The officer in charge of the situation had already made the determination that it was a barricaded subject situation. A source familiar with the situation said. So now we have to distinguish. Active shooter means go in and kill. Barricaded subject means there is no civilian at risk, no civilian in danger, and the suspect is barricaded himself. If that was the case and there's no civilian at risk and the subject has barricaded himself, then we can wait for more tactical gear, more personnel, equipment, all that stuff. But this was not the case because children were calling 911 saying, I'm in classroom 112, I'm in classroom 111. There are about 8 of us still alive. I hear them shooting at the door. So that means it is not a barricaded suspect. These children's lives are at risk. And the only thing that's going to save them is for these police officers to go in and take action and take him out. We may say we have no proof that the officers were aware that children's lives were at risk. But now it's coming out that the 911 operator saying that we notified police officers that we're getting calls from room, they're telling them what room they're in, 111, 112, and we're still alive. There's about 8 of us alive. So now the question is, now that we have definitive evidence that the 911 operator was notifying the officer that there were children alive, why did they not go in? I know the officer in charge said it's a barricaded subject situation and we're going to wait for more equipment. But they're all getting the same training and they all know that an active shooter needs to be eliminated. I know a couple of officers initially got grazed. Now the question is, and people trying to beat around the bush, were they scared? Of course, it's natural to be scared, but were they scared to the point where there's one thing to be scared, and the one to be scared and paralyzed. To be paralyzed with fear is the fact of your inability to act. We'll talk about crimes of commission and crime of omission, or sin of Commission instead of omission. Commission is you do something that is wrong. Omission is you don't do something and that was wrong. In this case, the omission of not acting was deadly because it was two things that was going to happen. One, the suspect was going to continue on his murderous rampage. It's carnage. It's massacre of innocent children. Or option two, you were going to go in and kill him. Unfortunately, option one occurred and he killed 19 children and 2 teachers. And they killed him only after waiting a prolonged period of time. They say that he was in the building for about 77 minutes. About 77, 78 minutes. That's a long time to be walking around, opening closets, opening doors, looking under benches, looking for children to murder. The reports, one of the girls said that he shut the door and the teacher approached him and he said to her, "Good night." And he shot her and killed her. These weapons are weapons of war. They're designed basically, like the vice president said, to inflict maximum damage on the human body, to kill as quickly as possible. And you're going to let an 18-year-old get it? And that same 18-year-old cannot drink alcohol, can't buy a drink, but you can buy an AR-15. You think this is the weapon of choice for these mass murderers, guys? We saw it in Buffalo. Same type of AR-15. And the NRA has such a stranglehold on these politicians that nothing is going to be done. But I believe eventually, I think the people of this nation are going to have to rise up and say that our children are not safe and we can't allow 50 people. It's 50 Republicans that block any meaningful gun control. 50 Republicans that allow these guys to go and buy 2 AR-15, and I think he said he bought about 1,600 rounds of ammunition. 12/19. Let's go back to 12/15. Members of the Border Patrol Tactical Unit arrive on scene. When Border Patrol agents began to arrive, the officer in charge of the situation had already made the determination that it was a barricaded subject situation. A source familiar with the situation said. The team then waited, not breaching the classroom where the shooter was holed up until nearly 40 minutes later. The officers waited. McGraw said the person who made that decision was the school district police chief, calling it the wrong decision not to engage the gunman sooner. That is not only the wrong, it was a deadly decision for those children. Absolute deadly decision not to engage. 12/17. Robb Elementary announced on Facebook that there's an active shooter at the school and authorities are at the scene. And just to paint the picture, when their parents got the alert on their phone, they left their job, they came down to the school, and they heard the shooting from outside. And cops were keeping them away. Some of the fathers were saying, "Give us your gun and give us your vest. We'll go in if you don't want to." Because they knew that their children are defenseless. Kindergarten, 5 and 6-year-old are no match to a murderous suspect with an AR-15, a duffel bag full of bullets and nothing on his mind but murder. They said, "Give us your gun and your vest and we'll go in." And the cops were so busy telling the parents, "Calm down," and so on. They even handcuffed one of the mothers. I believe that mother, later on, another cop came by and said, take the handcuffs off her. She was able to somehow run into the building, I believe, and to get her children. So it showed the inaction of the cop. It showed and like I said, I know it wasn't a big department, but it showed that whether it was paralyzed by fear, the inexperience, whatever, but it was a deadly decision to not go in. 12:16 p.m. The girl called 911 again and tells the dispatcher there are 8 to 9 students alive, McGraw said. She called again third time. There are 8 to 9 children alive. 12:19. Another person called 911 from one of the two classrooms and hangs up when another student tells her to, right? Because they probably were trying to be as quiet, and she probably called and said, "Shh, hang on," because he's probably close by, he can hear. 12:21. The suspect fires again. He was believed to be at the door, McGraw said. Law enforcement moved down the hallway. Because I know that one of the girls was saying he just shot the door. Send police now. 12:21. 3 shots fired are heard from another 911 call made. 3 shots fired are heard from another 911 call made. So the person is on the phone with 911, and I guess they hear the shooting over the phone. 12:36 p.m. The initial student who called 911 called again and is told to be very quiet and tell dispatchers he shot the door. The call lasted 21 seconds. Heartbreaking. I don't know, what happened. I know they asked the chief, McGraw, about whether any of the all of the students who called survived. He said he knows at least 1 or 2 survived. It was heartbreaking to hear that help is right there, but it was not fully engaged. 12:43 p.m. The young girl asked dispatchers to, quote, "Please send the police now." 12:47 p.m. The student asked for police again, McGraw said. A minute earlier, she had said she could hear the police next door. Because the police were very close by. She said, "Please send the police." I could hear them next door, so they were very close. 12:50 p.m. Law enforcement breached the locked classroom door using keys from a janitor, McGraw said. They shoot and kill the suspect. My question is, why do they have to wait for keys from a janitor? Why don't they shoot through the door? The suspected, that's how he got it. He shot through the door. Why don't they shoot through the door and go kill him? 12:51 p.m. Through the young girl's 911 call, there are loud noises and officers can be heard moving children out of the room, McGraw said. The child goes outside and the call cuts off. Look at this. The suspect purchased and had a total of 1,657 total rounds of ammunition, McGraw said. At least 315 of them were inside the school. And 142 of those were spent cartridges. So we know he fired at least 142 rounds. Defense of children. One nation under the gun. Another mass shooting in America. We're going to have to wake up. There's a lot of issues here. There's the issues of a uniform policy, which I guess is already on the books, of going in and killing these murderers. That's what has to be done. There's no negotiation. You go in and you kill them. Obviously, the biggest one is gun control. These military rifles is not necessary for hunting. Now should not be available in a civilized country, and it's the weapon of choice for these mass murderers. The NRA has too much power over the nation. How can 50 senators control, and stymie the desire of, millions of people, right? They say public opinion polls say that it's an overwhelming majority for common sense gun control, but yet we can't get it because these politicians want to be reelected. So here we are again. The other thing they all talk about is a good guy with a gun. We had good guys with guns, 19 of them, but they didn't go in and do what needed to be done. We saw a good guy with a gun in Buffalo, but the shooter had body armor, and he shot and hit, but it didn't penetrate because he had body armor. The common thread with all of these incidents is the easy availability of weapons of mass destruction. Right? We were talking about weapons of mass destruction, looking for weapons of mass destruction in Iraq with Saddam Hussein. These weapons of mass destruction now, the AR-15, these machine gun, military style assault weapons, either available at any gun show. 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-old, anybody who's feeling socially isolated, who's been bullied at school, and now they're going to go and inflict carnage and mayhem upon peaceful people. It cannot continue. MD investor out. God bless you all.